We're going to be talking about how to handle an NSF check for a cash customer or when there's a bill to involved. So in this scenario, we're going to look at a insurance bill to where there was a deductible that the customer paid and the customer's check bounced. If the insurance company had already paid this invoice, then we're going to have to unapply the payment that the insurance company had already sent us in order to be able to do the credit and rebill that we want to be able to do in order to handle the NSF check and make it where we can show that the customer still owes a deductible amount. Now the steps will be very similar to that in the other tutorial that we did on a cash customer NSF check. There were a few things in that tutorial that we talked about as far as some setup things, so you may need to go back through those. We set up in the general ledger, if you had the full accounting that you were using, we made sure that we had a expense account for the bank service charge, and we also set up a revenue account for an NSF service charge that we were going to charge the customer. And then we also set up a category and a part for the service charge that we were going to add to the customer's account. So let's start by pulling up the ticket. And as we can see on this ticket, the insurance company payment has already been applied in the accounts receivable module. So if you haven't already applied the check from the insurance company, if you haven't received that yet, then we're going to just skip this portion of this. But we need to go into the accounts receivable payment section, and we're going to need that AR TRAN number. So in the AR payment section there, you can see the AR TRAN number is 300. So we just need to jot that down and then go to AR payments, and then we're going to choose search. And in the transaction number field, we're going to type in 300 and search again. And so here's our payment that we've already applied to this invoice. So we're going to uncheck that. And now the payment is unapplied, and we'll save that, and we'll just say yes. Now we can close that for now. If we go back to our ticket, we need to hit restore. And once we hit restore, now you can see that the payment from the insurance company is now off of the ticket. Now we're going to go through our credit and rebill procedure so that we can remove the payment from the customer so that we can receive the payment again when they take care of the NSF check. So we're going to go in and we're going to do a full credit to an existing invoice and rebill. And we are crediting the current invoice. And I don't have anything in here for a NSF check, so I'm just going to choose unknown and put in NSF check for deductible and finish and yes. And so now we've created a credit, so that's credited out the original invoice. It's also put a negative $100 payment into my daily deposit screen, and we're going to use that then to reduce our checking account. And now we're on the new work order. So on this new work order, we're going to want to add in our NSF charge. So we're going to go down here to the next line and add in the NSF part number that we had created already. And you can see we have already a labor charge of $35 that we had for this. Now if you wanted to charge a different amount, we could just highlight that and change it. And if you didn't create a part for NSF, you could just simply type that in the part number field there, and the program would just ask if you're adding a manual part, and you could just say yes. And then you could manually add in your price. And then as far as the category, I had already created a service charge category. So again, if you haven't set up a specific category for a service charge, you could just put it into one of your miscellaneous sales accounts. Now, the thing we need to do next is go to the payment section. And if the customer has already come in and paid you for the NSF check, you could just change the amount that's there to the amount that they've paid you, which should, in our case, be $135. Now, the one little thing that we're going to run into with that is that $35 has been added to the insurance side of the equation, and we want that on the customer side of the equation. So in order to do that, we're going to need to go up here to the price section, and then here where we've got the betterment, we added in that $35, so we need to, in the labor section, put in $35. And so that tells the program that the customer will be paying that $35 and not the insurance company. Now, if the customer hasn't made the payment yet, we need to leave this open, so we need to delete that item out of there. In the payment section there, we've deleted the $100 out. And so now we can go ahead and you can see in the insured totals now it's got the $100 deductible plus the $35 betterment depreciation. And so the total for the customer is going to be $135, and the balance for the insurance company will remain the same. So now we're going to go ahead and save this as an invoice. Now, I mentioned this in the last tutorial as well. If the cash customer is going to be coming in and paying this in the next day or two, or even if you don't know when they're going to come pay it, you can leave this as a work order at this point. And then that way when the customer does return to make the payment, you can just post the payment by pulling up the work order and going here to the POS payments tab and putting in the payment there. However, you may want to go ahead and invoice this, because if you don't invoice it again in this situation, it's probably better to actually save it as an invoice again so that we can reapply the payment from the insurance company to this ticket. So in order to do that, because the insured is a cash customer, it's not going to allow me to save this as an invoice until I collect that balance. So because I haven't collected it yet, what I'm going to do is go to the customer tab, and here in the terms I'm going to change them from COD to something other than COD, such as net 30. Now I can actually go ahead and save this as an invoice. Now that I've saved this as an invoice, I want to go ahead and go back into AR and reapply that payment. So I'm going to go into the payment section. Once again, I'm going to do a search for transaction 300. And once I recall that transaction, I'm going to go ahead and mark the new invoice as paid and choose Save. And now if I go back here to this invoice and hit Restore, you'll see our balance for the insurance side is gone. One other thing to mention here, if the insurance company that you have for the bill to is set up for EDI, after you save this as an invoice, you're going to want to go back in here and override the EDI status so that it's showed as paid instead of new. Otherwise, it'll try and send the invoice again, and obviously since we've already been paid, we don't want to send that invoice through EDI again. So you'll just go and click on the override status button there, and then in the EDI status drop down, change it to paid, and then just save it. All right. Now we've got our invoice created. We had done a credit and rebill. So when we created the credit, because the customer had a $100 payment on the ticket originally, that credit created a negative $100 payment. So we're going to go into the AR daily deposit screen, and we're going to look for that negative 100 here. And we're going to go ahead and deposit that negative 100, and we want to change the date back to the date that the check was actually returned as NSF. So we'll change that date. So now what this is doing is it's reducing my check register by the $100 that the bank took back out. So I'll just save that. So we now just have that. You may also want to go into the notes section and put in a note saying something like NSF check number 2345 on invoice 98. And so then now we have a note on there as to why we have this negative deposit. Now the last thing we're going to want to do is, if the bank obviously would have charged you a service charge, we also need to add that service charge to our check register. So we would do that by going into AP and going to the check register credit card adjustment section. We're going to go ahead and put in the $35 fee or whatever they charged us. And then for the type, we're going to pick service charge. We're going to change the date back to the date that they charged us that. And then in the general ledger account area, we're going to put that to our bank service charge general ledger account. And again, you may want to put in a note here, NSF check number 2345 on invoice 98, and then just save that. Now, when the customer returns to make the payment, if we've already invoiced it, which in our case we have, we're going to go to AR, and we're going to go to the payment section. And here for the account, since it was a cash customer, we're just going to type in cash and pull up the cash customer account, put in the amount that they paid us, and then mark that invoice as paid. So once again, just to recap, with a cash customer who has an NSF check where there's a bill to involved, if the bill to has already paid their portion, then you're going to need to recall the invoice, find out the transaction number of the payment from the bill to, unapply that payment, then you can do a credit and rebill. On the rebill, you're going to add in any kind of extra service fee that you want to charge back to the customer. Because there's a bill to involved, you'll need to go to the price icon at the top, and then in the betterment section, add in the amount of the service charge that you added to their ticket. Then you're going to go ahead and save the ticket as an invoice once again. If it's an EDI bill to, you're going to need to make sure after you've saved it initially to go to the job tab and use the override status to change the status back to paid. And then you can go into your accounts receivable section, go back to the payment that was applied to the invoice originally for the insurance company, and reapply it to the new invoice that we've created. Then you're going to deposit the negative payment that was created on the credit invoice, and that's going to reduce your checking account for the NSF check. And then lastly, in the AP section, you're going to go ahead and the check register adjustment section, add in the service charge that the bank charges for that return check.